If I say the word globalization, what's the absolute first image that hits your brain? Be honest.
Oh, for me, it's got to be a huge container ship.
Right, a massive Maersk ship stacked with electronics, or maybe, a McDonald's sign glowing somewhere in a remote village. We're sort of conditioned to think of it as this hyper-modern thing.
That's the standard economic definition, for sure.
Yeah.
But if you look at the deep history of our species, that version is just a tiny ripple at the very end of a long story.
A really long story.
The true first wave of globalization didn't happen in the 20th century. It happened tens of thousands of years ago. It was the moment humanity stopped being a local species, restricted to a tropical niche, and decided to occupy almost every single environment on Earth.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We're unpacking a whole stack of research that goes from the archaeology of the Paleolithic, specifically what they call buffering technologies, all the way to linguistic forensics in Taiwan, and even computational modeling of ancient sea voyages.
We're trying to solve a biological paradox that I think doesn't get enough attention. How did a species that was biologically designed for the African tropics, we're essentially naked heat-dumping runners, how did we manage to colonize the freezing Arctic, the Americas, and these incredibly isolated Pacific islands?
That paradox is exactly where we have to start, because I think most of us assume humans are just naturally tough. We're at the top of the food chain, we conquered the planet, so we must be biologically robust.
Yeah, but the biological reality is actually the opposite. We're surprisingly fragile organisms.
Completely the opposite of tough.
Right. The source material puts this really well. It describes early humans as stenobiomic.
Stenobiomic. That sounds like a medical condition.
It kind of does, yeah. Just means having a narrow ecological tolerance. We were built for a very specific range of temperature and humidity. Biologically, we're an afrotropical species.
But we became eurybiomic, capable of inhabiting a wide niche.
Exactly. Not by changing our biology, but by changing our behavior and our technology.
There's a specific myth the research busts here that I found really surprising. We always call ourselves the naked ape, but technically, that's not true.
It's a trick of the eye. We actually have the same density of hair follicles as a chimpanzee.
No way.
Yeah, but ours is vellus hair. It's microscopic, it's unpigmented. The reason we look naked is purely functional. We evolved 10 times the density of sweat glands compared to a chimp. We're basically a water-cooled engine designed to run down prey in the heat.
Which is a superpower in the Rift Valley. You can outrun a gazelle because the gazelle overheats and you just keep going.
But if you take that wet, sweating body, which is basically a radiator trying to dump heat, and you drop it into the Arctic Circle.
It's a death sentence.
A complete death sentence. The sources are very specific on the physics of this. Without cultural aids, clothes, shelter, fire, the human body starts to fail biologically at just 13 degrees Celsius.
13 degrees? That's 55 Fahrenheit. That's a mild autumn day. I'd put on a light sweater, but I wouldn't think I was dying.
You wouldn't think it, but without that sweater, your body is already losing the battle. Below that, you start shivering uncontrollably. Your manual dexterity just plummets, so you can't make tools. If your core temp hits 28 Celsius, you're looking at cardiac arrest.
Wow.
So, to leave Africa, we had to invent what the researchers call buffering technologies.
This is the idea of cultural biogeography, right?
Yeah.
If biology is too slow to evolve a fur coat, you just have to build one.
You have to build one. Exactly. And the distinction the research makes here is fascinating. It's not just wearing clothes. It's the difference between simple and complex clothing.
I always just assumed early clothing was, animal skins draped over the shoulders, like a toga made of bison hide.
And that's simple clothing. Think of a cape or a robe. It's loose, maybe one layer.
Yeah.
That actually works well in the desert because it shades you, but allows airflow for that whole sweat mechanism.
Right. It keeps you cool.
But it offers very little actual insulation. And it definitely doesn't work in a wind chill. If you're moving into Northern Europe during the last ice age, a cape isn't going to cut it.
A wind just cuts right through it. You'd freeze.
Instantly. You need complex clothing. This is fitted, multi-layered gear that creates a cylinder of trapped air around your body and your limbs. It requires cutting, shaping, sewing.
It's basically an ancient spacesuit.
That's a great way to put it. And the research points to the Venus of Willendorf figurine.
The famous little fertility statue.
That's the one. She's about 30,000 years old. And she's depicted nude. But if you look very closely at her head, she's wearing a knitted headgear.
Huh.
The argument is, you don't develop the technology to knit a complex hat unless you are also making complex garments. It implies this whole mastery of fiber technology we just don't give them credit for.
So we have the spacesuit, the fitted furs, and then we need the space station, the shelter. And this is where the imagery in the research just gets wild.
Yeah, we have to move past the cartoon image of the caveman. Humans didn't just find caves. They engineered their own microclimates. The site at Kraków-Badzista Street B in Poland is just the perfect example.
I looked up the rendering of this. It's a structure built almost entirely out of mammoth bones.
90% mammoth bone. But look at how they use them. The heavy lower jaws and tusks form a structural lattice, which was likely covered in thick skins. This wasn't a random pile of bones. It was specific architecture for a treeless steppe tundra.
They couldn't build log cabins. There were no logs.
So they used what they had. It's like an Inuit igloo, using the only available material to create a perfect insulator. But instead of snow, it's the skeletons of megafauna.
It's incredible.
Compare them to the Ohala II site in the Jordan Valley. There they had wood, so they built brush huts out of tamarisk and oak. It just shows that human expansion wasn't about finding the perfect spot. It was about forcing the spot to be perfect through engineering.
But there is a huge cost to this artificial bubble strategy, and that's fire. We romanticize the hearth, but the research points out the economic burden of fire.
It's massive.
Yeah.
A small hearth needs 1.5 to 3 kilograms of wood for just a few hours of heat.
Yeah.
If you're keeping a fire going all night, every night, you're talking about tons of fuel per year.
Which creates a huge labor debt. Someone has to go gather all that wood.
And it forced a complete social reorganization. You need a division of labor. But the return on that investment was what the sources call social glue. Fire extends the day. It allows for storytelling, for complex language to develop, for bonding after the sun goes down. It turned the night from a time of fear into a time of culture.
Okay, so we have the toolkit for the cold. Fitted furs, mammoth bone houses, and social fire. That gets us across the land bridges. But then we hit the water. And this is where the story shifts from surviving to navigating.
This brings us to what's called the First Maritime Revolution. And to understand this, we have to look at a place called Wallachia.
Wallachia. It sounds like a fictional kingdom from a fantasy novel.
It does, but it's a very real biogeographical zone. It's that whole group of islands nestled between the Asian continental shelf Sunda and the Australian shelf Sahul.
And the crucial thing to understand is that Wallachia was never connected by land bridges.
Never. Even during the deepest ice ages when sea levels were way lower, there was always deep water separating these islands.
So, unlike getting to the Americas, where you could technically walk across the Bering Land Bridge, you could not walk to Australia. You had to get on something that floated.
And yet, we know humans arrived in Australia at least 50,000 years ago. That means a deliberate crossing. Now, there's a big debate in archaeology about how they did it. There are two main highways, the northern route and the southern route.
Okay, let's break that down. The northern route goes from Sulawesi to New Guinea. The southern route is through the Lesser Sunda Islands, places like Timor and Flores.
Right. And conventionally, researchers favored the northern route. If you stand on one island, you can often see the next one. So it feels safer. Plus, it's covered in dense rainforest.
Which sounds good, right? Lots of plants, lots of animals. Why wouldn't you take the jungle route?
You'd think. But hunting in a dense rainforest with Paleolithic tools is actually a nightmare. It's hard to move. It's hard to see prey. The southern route presents a different problem. The islands are smaller, and the ecosystems are what biologists call depauperate.
Depauperate, meaning poor.
Poor in calories, fewer large mammals, fewer edible plants. It sounds like a terrible choice, but the research we're looking at suggests this very scarcity was the driver of innovation.
This is where that term ichthyarchaeology comes in, the study of ancient fish bones.
Yes. Because the land was poor, these humans turned to the sea. At a site called Asitaukuru in Timor, they found evidence of pelagic fishing dating back 42,000 years.
Pelagic is the key word there, isn't it? We're not talking about scooping up crabs in a tide pool.
Not at all. Pelagic means open ocean. We are talking about tuna, mackerel, fast-moving, deep-water fish. You cannot catch a tuna with a spear while standing on the beach.
So this implies boats.
Boats capable of going offshore and likely complex trolling techniques.
It's staggering.
42,000 years ago, people were essentially deep-sea fishermen.
And they had specialized gear. At another site, Tron Bon Lay, they found shellfish hooks from 12,000 years ago.
These are specialized tools. It suggests the barrier of the ocean had been transformed into a pantry. The ocean became their main source of food.
But here's the gap in the data. We know a lot about this southern route because of these amazing sites. The northern route is still kind of a mystery.
It is, but that's changing. The research mentions new techniques being applied there, specifically something called ZoomS.
ZoomS, that sounds like a video conferencing app for animals.
It's close. It stands for Zooarchaeology by Mass Spectrometry. It's a method of identifying the collagen proteins in tiny bone fragments. Usually, fish bones are so small and fragmented you can't tell what species they are just by looking. ZoomS lets us chemically identify them. So researchers are now applying this to sites in the north to see if they also had this maritime tech, or if they were just sticking to the rainforest.
It's forensic science meeting ancient history. It's so cool. Okay, let's fast forward a bit. We've established that humans can cross water. But around 4,000 years ago, this whole maritime thing goes into overdrive.
You get the expansion of the Austronesian peoples.
This is arguably the greatest migration in human history, just in terms of sheer distance covered. These are the ancestors of Malays, Filipinos, Polynesians.
All the way to Madagascar and Easter Island. We knew for a long time that this expansion started around Taiwan. But the who and the where in Taiwan were fuzzy.
And this is where the linguistic research comes in. It treats language like a fossil record.
Exactly. New research points a finger specifically at the Amis people of eastern Taiwan.
This part was fascinating to me because it hinges on such tiny details. One of them is the ma factor.
It's a grammatical ethics. So in the Amis language and in the languages of the people who expanded, you use the prefix ma to include the actor in the sentence. For example, kulas burned the house.
Okay, so ma links kulas to the action of burning.
Right. That specific grammatical structure is banned or just non-existent in the other indigenous Taiwanese languages. But it is the standard structure in Malayo-Polynesian languages like Tagalog and Maori. It's like finding a genetic marker, but in grammar.
And then there's the vocabulary clue. And I have to warn you, we are going to be a little bit anatomical here for a second, but it's scientifically so important.
It really is the strongest evidence we have.
Yeah.
The Amis word for a vagina is puki.
Right.
Now, if you look at Tagalog, the word is puki. In Malay, it's puki. The etymological root is just. It's undeniable. Meanwhile, the other indigenous groups in Taiwan use completely different roots like kuji or kuti.
It's a linguistic fingerprint. It basically proves that the people who left Taiwan and colonized the entire Pacific were specifically related to this one group on the East Coast.
And the narrative that emerges is really interesting. It suggests there was a pause. This group likely stayed on the east coast of Taiwan for maybe 1,000 years.
An incubation period.
Exactly. A millennium to perfect the outrigger canoe, to master the sail, to develop navigation systems. They didn't just jump in a log and drift. They spent 30 generations building a maritime civilization before they launched.
And that launch eventually hit Hawaii, New Zealand, Easter Island. But this brings up a conflict in how modern science tries to understand these voyages. We love our computer models.
Oh, we do. We input wind speeds, currents, drift patterns. We treat it like a physics problem. Could a canoe physically get from point A to point B?
And the research from Helen Farr suggests this misses the point entirely.
Because it treats the ocean as a void, a geometry problem. For us, the sea is the empty space between lands. But for these navigators, the ocean was a meritory.
A maritime territory. I love that word.
It's great, isn't it? It wasn't a gap. It was a place of dwelling. The canoe wasn't just a vehicle. The source describes it as a mobile site of culture. When you're on a voyage for 3 weeks, that canoe is your entire village.
And the motivation wasn't always just, let's find new land because we're running out of food. It was often about maintaining social networks.
We see this in the ethnographic records. The Sawai system, for instance, a tribute network between Yap and the outer islands, or the famous Kula ring.
Right, the Kula ring trading shell necklaces and armbands in this giant circle across islands.
But think about what they're trading. These shells have no survival value. You can't eat them. You can't build a shelter with them. People were risking their lives on the open ocean, not for calories, but for prestige, for connection, for social capital.
It's a highway of culture.
It's the Vasalola network, the great ocean network between Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. They traded canoe wood, red feathers, fine mats.
There's a beautiful term from the Marshall Islands mentioned in the text. Remedo.
People of the sea. That's their identity. They didn't define themselves by the island they stood on, but by the ocean they mastered.
So if we zoom out and look at this entire first wave of globalization, it seems to flip the script on how we view early humans. We usually picture them as desperate, driven by hunger, barely scraping by.
But the evidence suggests the opposite. From the social glue of the fire hearths in the Ice Age to the exchange of red feathers across the Pacific. These expansions were driven by what the sources call adaptive knowledge. We moved from adapting biologically, which is slow and painful, to adapting culturally, which is fast and flexible.
We basically hacked the game. We were fragile tropical animals, so we built mammoth bone armor and we built floating villages.
And we did it because we were curious. We didn't just expand to survive, we expanded to connect.
Which leaves us with a bit of a provocation for you listening right now. We are still that tropical species. We still freeze at 55 degrees Fahrenheit, but now we inhabit deserts, tundras, and even low Earth orbit.
We're surrounded by our own modern buffering technologies, HVAC systems, Gore-Tex, pressurized airplane cabins. We're still building mammoth bone huts. They just look like skyscrapers and server farms now.
The question is, are our modern buffers as sustainable as the ones our ancestors used? The mammoth bone hut eventually just went back to the Earth.
I'm not so sure our glass and steel towers will age quite as gracefully. We've outsourced our survival to a very complex, very energy-hungry global machine. The Paleolithic toolkit was elegant in its efficiency. Ours, well, the jury's still out.
Something to chew on the next time you adjust the thermostat. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
My pleasure.